Hi, my name is M. Rolstig, and thank you for coming to listen today. Okay, today I want to talk about the queer reception of Orpheus in two recent French films, Theo et Hugo and Portrait of a Lady on Fire. Okay, but first I want to acknowledge that Orpheus was canonically bisexual, even in some ancient literary sources. There are 4 references from antiquity that specifically reference his homosexual love. Phaenocles, where he loves a boy named Callias on the Argo. Ovid, where he founds a cult for Thracian boys. Hyginus and Philarginus. The latter 2, which follow Ovid, who is believed to have followed Phaenocles. Okay, 2 modern French movies from 2016 and 2019. We will start with Theo et Hugo. This film follows 2 gay men who meet at a gay sex club and get to know each other over the next 2 early morning hours as they wander the streets of Paris. Whereas Orpheus's male gaze is fatal to Eurydice, in this film, erotic queer eye contact indicates both desire and consent. The film crafts a successful queer love story out of the tragedy of a classical heterosexual love story, reconfiguring Orphic constructs of gender and sexuality for a happy ending. The film begins with a naked Theo walking downstairs into a pit of red and blue flashing colored bodies, L'Impact Sex Club, the erotic underworld of this modern retelling. Here, the underworld is not a space of suffering, but one of pleasure. While both Orpheus and Theo go down to this underworld looking for a lover, the men of Paris go here willingly without the threat of harassment. The mass of red bodies emphasizes the corporeal generalization of the club scene, like the nameless masses of those in the underworld. And then the view narrows its scope to focus on the relationship between just 2 men. Theo, a curly-haired, effeminate man, is a first-time visitor and is simultaneously terrified and fascinated by all the sex scenes around him. He acts as a surrogate point of view for the voyeuristic audience. When the 2 men first encounter each other, everyone else disappears from the background, no longer participants, but witnesses. This tableau mimics how all of hell stands still when they hear Orpheus's music, and our attention is focused only on him and his plight for Eurydice. Looking and eye contact is a reoccurring action in this film, in ways that transform the infamous turn in classical myth to underline the danger, but also the desire of homoerotic eye contact. The 2 men first lock eyes from across the room while mounting other partners. As they then approach each other, they're engulfed in a halo of white light. This staging emphasizes the prophetic quality of their encounter with a religious undertone, suggesting that it's more magical than a mere late-night hookup. Like Orpheus and Eurydice, the artifice of this lighting suggests that the pair's instantaneous connection is ordained by fate. The first words spoken in this film come 18 minutes into a dreamy, choreographed orgy of gay men. As they have sex in the club, Theo asks, "You always keep your eyes shut?" To which Hugo says that keeping his eyes shut helps him be completely with Theo. In this film, not looking is portrayed as a form of presence and intimacy. There's a sense of playfulness and innocence in their encounter. They meet in a vulnerable state, naked except for brightly colored sneakers. Theo and Hugo have intimately known each other's bodies before sharing thoughts. Hugo and Theo then ascend this dark staircase back into the upper outside world, hand in hand, together, altering both the heteronormative hierarchy and the tragic structure of the original myth. When they exit the club, it appears first as though Hugo has disappeared and Theo has lost him unexpectedly. But even this playful moment comments on the intentional change to the mythic topos. Hugo immediately reappears from his hiding place with outstretched arms, a happy welcome gesture that is specifically anti-Orphic, evoking the image of Orpheus's outstretched arms seizing on nothing as Eurydice disappears. Theo remarks that the night is only fitting for women and gay men, which is reminiscent of the young boys and maidens of whom the Ovidian Orpheus sings. There's no single movement to the upward world. Instead, the narrative turns in spatial circles, occurring under the queer and safe cover of night. During a scene in the metro, they again fix their gaze on each other for the whole ride, intentionally subverting the negative connotations of the glance in the original myth. At one time, they even shout playfully, "I'm following you," as they walk around in circles next to each other. Both of them move forward in their lives together, side by side, mimicking the equality of Orpheus and Eurydice when they are reunited in Elysium in Ovid's version. Most of the film consists of two men following each other around Paris in no particular direction, looking intensely at each other. Theo and Hugo are both Orpheus and Eurydice figures, trying to understand the nature of their relationship as equal partners. Leading by hand-holding plays a key role in repositioning the two figures as a gesture of possibility and intimacy instead of control. The film shifts to an almost clinical tone to portray the realities of gay romance, as Theo and Hugo wait together in a hospital room to be tested for AIDS. From the specificities of the sex club, with its prominently displayed lube and handy wipes, to the lengthy emergency room visit in the movie, the fairy tale quality of the film is routinely interrupted by harsh reminders of modern day sex safety. When they find out that Theo does have HIV, they vow to stick together through it, not even leaving each other for the trip to the hospital. Once the men have discovered that they have discordant statuses and have failed to follow safe-sex procedures, the protocol and medical treatment is outlined by a calm and composed doctor, almost in a didactic way to the audience. This stabilizes the film in reality, giving it more ballast and weight than the classical tragic love story. After Hugo has walked Theo all the way home to the hospital, he insists that they stay together for breakfast. Theo starts to go back home and get his phone, but Hugo hits him with that archetypal Orphic ultimatum. If you go back, I'll leave. But Theo does not turn back. Instead, he follows Hugo into the morning sunshine for a happy ending. By recasting the ancient myth through the modern lens of two homosexual men, the film opens up a new narrative with two men of equal age and status. The Orphic figures here are not constrained to a normative love story based on loss, grief, a heteronormative gendered hierarchy, but instead they are liberated through their homosexuality and they go forward together. Unlike stories with a female Eurydice, in Theo and Hugo, there's a more equal power dynamic, both physically when they have sex and emotionally when they are forced to be vulnerable and honest with each other regarding their past. The film reopens the largely lost tradition of a male-loving Orpheus, but since Theo and Hugo are of similar ages, this representation does not have to be predetermined by mythic or pederastic conventions. Okay, moving on. Portrait of a Lady on Fire, or The Female Gaze. In Celine Sciamma's 2019 Portrait of a Lady on Fire, the artist Marianne must undertake a nearly impossible feat, observing her subject, Heloise, imperceptibly and painting her in secret afterward. This turns out to be pretty impossible because her muse always insists on walking ahead of her when they go for walks along the beach. Like Eurydice, Heloise's character is only introduced through Marianne's point of view. She's a hooded figure here, first seen from behind, 20 minutes into the movie. The camera work repeatedly switches back and forth to Marianne's point of view as she picks up subtle hints of Heloise's personality. How she walks, the way her hair moves, how she positions her arms, reflects her mood. At first, Marianne's attention to detail is primarily professional as an artist, but as she sees and gets to know and understand her muse, the artist's observation becomes more tender, an attraction that is spelled out in the paint on her canvas. In an interview, Sciamma mentions that this is a film about dismantling the myth of the female muse who inspires the male muse's artwork, not objectifying her, but instead making her partake by giving her a voice and allowing her to think. As Marianne herself tells her muse Heloise, "I didn't dream of you, I thought of you." Rather than treating Heloise as an object, presenting her to society through the male gaze, her artwork is a collaboration between muse and artist, a creation that cannot exist without mutual understanding. By changing up this artist-muse dynamic, Heloise rejects the passivity of a model and puts both of the two women on an equal level. The women explore their love side by side. After sharing a kiss and gazing deep into each other's eyes, Heloise asks Marianne, "Have you ever known love? What does it look like?" Their love language at first is communicated through visual connection, eye contact, which allows the film to demonstrate how queer subjects must occupy and subvert the heteronormative gaze. It is only through this reciprocal act of shared looking and togetherness that the story can evolve to love. Whereas Orpheus's male gaze literally kills Eurydice, in this film, looking indicates desire and consent, like Theo and Hugo. It is the female gaze here that creates the intimacy when words themselves are not enough. Okay. By changing up the artist-muse dynamic, Heloise rejects the passivity of a model, like I mentioned. As the artist observes and paints her, her subject observes her back. Heloise asks knowingly, "If you look at me, who do I look at?" Inferring she looks back at the artist. Marianne, accustomed to being comfortable as a spectator, is shaken by the realization that she's capturing a subject who also sees her too. This film plays with the thrill and terror of being seen and the reciprocal relationship, both in art and in the act of seeing. This specifically subverts the paradigmatic male gaze described by Laura Mulvey, based on a patriarchal unconscious, which derives pleasure from voyeurism and narcissism, in which female characters are usually looked at by men and the object of desire. As the two lay in bed one morning and Marianne sketches her love, Heloise laments how she will have nothing to remember her by, while Marianne, on the other hand, has a whole collection of images of her to keep. There's a disconnect here between the created artistic works that represent Heloise and knowing the actual woman herself. Marianne insists on the importance of not regretting, but remembering. Like Orpheus, all she will have left after losing her love is the image of her. Like in the myth, this film contemplates the burden of memory and art's power to preserve it. Placing Marianne's face, her reflected face, directly on Heloise's inguinal vagina region calls to mind the representation of non-heteronormative sex, implying what may have occurred off-scene. Sciamma's camera work alternatively focuses on Heloise's satisfied face as she watches her and on Marianne's concentrated sketching. The result is a depiction of what Sciamma calls the eroticism of consent, in which she uses cinematic language of the female gaze to mystify the experience of falling in love. Marianne merges the identities of artist and muse by drawing herself into Heloise's erotic pose so that she is both gazing at her lover and also reflecting herself. Sciamma's film demonstrates the deep universal emotions of a queer romance story, After they sleep together, their unspoken desire is finally realized in just how new and vivid their first foray into intimacy and sex is. Do all lovers feel as if they're inventing something? Heloise whispers to her. On their last night together, they face each other in bed, and Marianne tells Heloise, don't fall asleep yet. Their last moments together are a testament to the gaze as remembrance. They memorize each other as if the longer they look, the longer they will remember. We are periodically reminded that this sanctuary of queer love cannot last. When Marianne has visions of Heloise in her wedding dress, Heloise is destined to marry a rich man after this painting is commissioned. In her dreams, she tells Heloise to turn around, but when she does, just like Eurydice, she vanishes. This film is full of erotic moments of tense eye contact. It takes the dynamic of looking in the traditional Orpheus and Eurydice myth and adapts it, portraying the two female lovers as equals who recreate themselves and build a romantic connection through artwork. In this movie, they actually read a French translation of the Orpheus myth from Ovid's Metamorphoses. Heloise explains that Orpheus made the poet's choice, not the lovers. Perhaps Eurydice mattered more to Orpheus as a memory and a muse rather than as a person. In her understanding of the myth, Orpheus made a conscious decision to let Eurydice die a second time, keeping her young and perfect in his mind forever. Sciamma's story's tension lies in knowing that it will end. There is a set amount of time they have together, but not knowing when the end will come. The implications of this are clear. Heloise has been arranged to marry a Milanese nobleman, so the women are aware that ultimately they will no longer exist to each other, except as memories from their time together on this remote, deserted island. Sciamma makes clear that this love story is a story of almosts. We know that Marianne and Heloise could never truly end up together in 17th century France, but we still torture ourselves with the question, what if? The film agrees with Heloise's selfish logic that nothing lasts forever, and no one is as beautiful as the memories and impression they leave behind. Even though both relationships are fated to end, their love stories are immortalized in the artwork they leave behind. Love, like a painting, is never really finished, but can only be kept and remembered. Portrait of a Lady on Fire is primarily a romance, but it is also a film about a deeply personal process of creativity and art, the pain and joy of capturing one's emotions in a work of art. While this is similar to the paradigmatically male eroticized relationship to art, Marianne takes it one step further by not only immortalizing her lover in art, but also creating a portrait of herself for Heloise to remember her by. In this queer relationship, both women are on equal terms and on a reciprocal level of artist and muse. Sciamma shows these creative implications in a game of eye contact and mirrors. The audience is reminded that queer women have always existed and that they only exist for themselves and for each other, not for anyone else to sexualize or traumatize. In the penultimate scene, years after the lovers have parted forever, we see Marianne again, still reminiscing about her past romance through the metaphor of classical mythology. She presents her own painting of Orpheus and Eurydice, to which an onlooker replies, usually he's portrayed before he turns or after. Here they seem to be saying goodbye. Like in Ovid's Metamorphoses, Marianne allows Eurydice and thus herself a final farewell with her lover in this symbolic painting. And like Orpheus, she uses art to remember her lover, replacing her with an image of herself. Like Theo and Hugo, this film subverts typical gender roles of the original myth, creating a love story where both characters are female. This film comprises of only female speaking roles, and as Heloise describes her time among the other women in the convent, equality is a pleasant feeling. Sciamma allows for 121 minutes of female intimacy and romance without the hypersexualization and performative nature into which a straight male director often falls. By deconstructing the Orpheus myth and recontextualizing it into an all-feminine sphere, Sciamma redefines the eroticism of looking and the female gaze into a conduit for desire, pleasure, and mutual understanding. Okay, so in conclusion, to broaden this to the sphere of classical reception begins with a desire for what is absent. Both these two films subvert typical gender roles of the origin myth for a modern audience. Classical reception's engagement with foreignness is an example of modernity's self-consciousness. We no longer wish to possess or recreate antiquity, but to understand it as part of a discourse in which modernity can reproduce itself. The glance, the looking, and the separation between Orpheus and Eurydice provides the link between an ancient ideal and a present possibility for new poetic recreation. Orpheus himself is known as the father and founder of poetry. Eye contact, just like reception itself, is a dialectical process, both giving and receiving data to reach a conclusion. Reception studies of classical mythology itself is like Orpheus's gaze. It balances between the new and the old, between change and tradition, as the classical text and the character of Orpheus himself simultaneously become modern and ancient. Thank you. Okay, here are my sources, which I referenced in my PowerPoint. Thank you all for listening to me, and I look forward to discussing classical reception with you more during the live conference. See you.